This video is a philosophical one about the nature of ultimate reality. The reason for this video was initially to explain why the wise, who understand the nature of ultimate reality, aren't emotional. So, by the end of this video, the viewer should know what is meant by emotion and by the phrase ultimate reality, and why wisdom and emotion never go together. I'll begin with the most difficult part, that is, explaining the concept ultimate reality. Ultimate reality can only be understood intellectually using dualistic concepts. The difficulty is to avoid a particular very common attitude to dualities. Most people use dualities to focus on one aspect and ignore another, and to fail to see what all dualities and divisions have in common. So that's what I need the viewer to try to avoid. What I need the viewer to try to do is to clear up what happens when they think of something and perceive how a contrast is created to other things. That dualistic contrast needs to be itself made the focus of dualistic thinking. What happens when you think about something that is not dualistic, something that is not contrasted? Obviously, it can't be done. So what I'm trying to get the viewer to perceive with that little experiment is to see that any dualistic, contrasted, limited, bounded, specific reality cannot be ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is precisely that which is not a dualistic, contrasted, bounded thing. One should see that ultimate reality is a philosophical concept and is understood using logical deduction. It isn't understood using scientific induction based on observation of sense data. If it were, one could not be sure what is ultimately real. One would always be waiting for more data and more observations. So, to understand the nature of ultimate reality, one must enter the logical realm. One has to be skilled in defining abstract terms like thing, finite, reality, and other terms in a purely logical manner. Let's look closely at the concept ultimate reality. Clearly, the qualifier ultimate should indicate that ultimate reality is not a reality. It is what is ultimately real. It is not something that is partly real, or perhaps real, or probably an illusion, or true only for a certain percentage of consciousnesses in a specific region of the universe. It is ultimately real for all realities. It is absolutely the final determinant of what is real. It's not relative to something else. It's not existing by contrast to something else. It's not limited and dependent on the existence of something else. So can you see what I'm pointing to by this use of dualism? I mentioned the term finite a minute ago. I define finite as something that is limited by something. In other words, anything that is limited or restricted by the existence of something else is finite. So now, by contrast, there is a concept called the totality. It means the totality of all things, everything. It's the sum of all things. So notice that the totality of all things is alone what cannot be bounded or limited or contrasted or exclusive or relative or dualistic. Only the totality cannot be dependent on something external to itself, because the totality is defined as all things, not just some. Now I'm going to make some big steps here, so you may want to pay very close attention. The totality is not itself finite. The totality which is ever present is not itself finite. In other words, what is always present is non-dual. This is a definitional truth pointing to the absolute nature of ultimate reality. Non-duality is present for any consciousness in any world, time, space, perspective, mood, construction of reality, or other experiences. So wisdom is rightly attributed to one who understands the nature of ultimate reality. They can't go wrong, even if one specific individual reality is actually a matrix. They will still be experiencing something, and therefore be experiencing some part of ultimate reality. Now, I realise that some viewers, including the overly emotional witch hunter types, but not only them, will be sceptical of these ideas. They may think that such a concept is literally impossible. They may find it rings of the overly imaginative fantasies of theosophy, religious mysticism, navel-gazing academic philosophers, or plain freaky cult doctrine. But such an interpretation only looks at the words used and is a superficial investigation. Yet others may have been brainwashed to believe that the scientific method, which never asserts anything with certainty because of its requirement for sensory data which always changes in the next instant, must discredit the idea of ultimate reality. So they may want to throw epithets like absolutist, dogmatist, fundamentalist, or the like in my direction. But I challenge the YouTuber to think over the philosophical concept of ultimate reality. Feel free to raise questions or leave a comment if you can think of anything that seems incoherent in the concept of ultimate reality. I do challenge you to do what you can to explore any potential flaws or any flaws that you do think are there, because this is a very important key to understanding what is